Good morning to all of you. We're so excited that you're here with us today for what will be a really exciting and, as Rob said, interactive day. At this juncture, I have the pleasure and delight to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Phil Duncan, Global Design Officer for Procter & Gamble. In this role, Phil oversees all design for this over $80 billion consumer products company. And like Phil, he started his career right here in Cincinnati, down the road at P&G. Actually, we both started in hair care way back when. And then he later held leadership roles in various parts of the world for Landor in North America, Europe, and the Middle East. In 2008, Phil returned to P&G and was appointed P&G Global Design Officer, leading all aspects of design, including package, product, and retail design. Currently, he leads a talented team of over 300 design, technical, and research experts, some of whom are in this room, so we're excited to have you here today. And they work on creating really breakthrough innovations, new business ideas, and other ways to delight the over 4 billion P&G brand consumers around the world. Phil is also a lead executive for P&G's Olympic Games sponsorship, vice president of P&G Ventures, as well as P&G executive sponsor for ArtsWave. Phil, we're so thrilled that you're with us here today. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Phil Duncan.
It is great to be here at Construct, Vicki. Thank you very much for the nice, warm welcome. We had gone back and forth a little bit earlier, and I had a slightly longer tome, if you will, of my experiences, and I joked with Vicki, and I said, oh my gosh, this sounds like my mom wrote that. So let's shorten that a little bit. And if you don't mind, I'm a wanderer. I like to walk, so I'm going to step down here. Is that okay? Maybe it makes it a little less formal because I've got a lot of work to show. And I think the whole construct of Construct is to encourage discussion and debate. We at P&G don't have all the answers, obviously, from a branding and design standpoint. But I brought a lot of work across many venues, so hopefully inspire you, make you think about your business brands, your education, maybe differently, maybe reinforce some of the thoughts that you already have. So I'm going to go through a lot of different types of creative work, but I thought it was really obviously great to leverage the theme of this kind of forum. And also put a bit of a different counterpoint onto it. So this whole notion of creativity and consistency, and can the two actually live together? And I think that's a real challenge for brand builders, designers, strategists, in terms of how do you think about this notion of driving consistency so consumers understand who you are, what is your proposition, what is your promise you're making to them. But at the same time, you're trying to differentiate yourself versus the sea of communication that's out there. So that's kind of where I'll go through the presentation. I'll try to encourage some dialogue along the way. But if there's a burning question that you have to ask, or you feel so opposed to something that I've just said, please raise your hand. That's the spirit of this forum, okay? Sound good? All right. So I first have to start, interestingly, with the second presenter that you'll hear today is Joe Stitzline. And Joe and I have some history together. Joe and I worked at Landor here in Cincinnati many, many, many years ago, probably and about 15 or so years ago, maybe 17, we created this. So if you've seen this around the city, right, you can thank or not us for this work. But Joe and I can wax on a lot about the bridges as the connecting metaphor for the region, red for Ohio, blue for Kentucky, and because we needed green, that's for Indiana. We had a tagline called Altogether Surprising. And when I think about that 15 years ago, a lot of people in our city said, altogether surprising. What's surprising about Cincinnati, Ohio? I'm sorry, but I thought now I look back and I think, God, Joe, we were visionaries. I mean, look at over the Rhine. Look at this city. It's amazing. So unfortunately, though, then I did go online and I saw this. So, so to the theme of consistency and maybe not. Anyway, so, but I just thought it's great to reconnect with Joe. He's a fabulous design, just master and a wonderful friend and colleague. So we'll have the chance to do some Q&A at the end of both of our presentations. I think we're going to do it together. So you'll see some of the Mutual Admiration Society in real life. I apologize up front. All right, I want to talk a little bit about all these different platforms that are really coming to us as creative people and strategists. And at times they can seem really overwhelming, right? I've got to figure out how to master, Snapchat and Google and YouTube, and yet I still, obviously, there's TV as a platform. There's clearly the design aspects for our work. And I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't get to update my G for Google yet, so you can talk about that. But this can seem obviously incredibly overwhelming right now in terms of the opportunities as well as the challenges to drive a consistent brand message across this, but also resonate with the users that are out on these kind of platforms. And I think this is an amazing time to be kind of creatives in this space of branding and brand development, whether you're on the design and creation or advertising side or on the strategy and implementation side, what have you. So we've thought about this notion at P&G. Many of my colleagues are here, which is great. They can keep me honest, about this kind of creative canvas. And it's a metaphor for how we think about driving the sense of consistency, yet also allowing for creativity. And so when you think about the classic impressionist paintings and what have you, they're putting together these interesting constructs, these platforms of color and light, and trying to creating a larger whole. And we like this metaphor at P&G because it both defines a space for which a brand should play, obviously on this canvas, but there's a lot of room and freedom as well. But it also helps from I'll call it a context standpoint, to make sure that the brand is showing up consistently, accurately, and kind of building a larger whole. So the creative canvas as a metaphor, and I'll come back and talk about that a lot throughout the presentation. But at the end of the day, no matter what kind of creative you are producing onto what platform, there are three kind of fundamental principles that still apply no matter what your kind of format. Who is it for? And really understanding them, not just on a psychological or definition, 35 plus, woman, shops twice a week, whatever, but what are her behaviors? What is she really doing? Where is she showing up online? Who is she connecting with? What other brands define her pantry, her closet, her lifestyle? What are the things that she's inviting into her life? What are the tensions in her life to really get at an insight? So again, thinking about no matter the platform, first and foremost, understanding your who is critical. Second, why should they care about the work that you're putting forward? Truly, why do you want them to care about it? Is it meaningful? Is it to make them laugh? Is it to make them buy your brand? Is it to entertain them? Is it to share? All sorts of things. And then frankly, what's the reason? Which I kind of leaned into this point. And we think about kind of the role of creative, there's kind of four key fundamental roles. One is a level of just remind, okay? So when you think about creative work and you're doing a Facebook post, how creative does that work really have to be? Or should it just be a reminder that that brand is in my world, right? Second, it should educate. There's still a lot of people, particularly younger people, who look at our brands and say, I'm not sure they're relevant. How is a fabric enhancer or a fabric softener important and relevant in my life? Well, have we taught them how to use it? Have we educated them on this? A terrible story, but here I am, global design officer at P&G. My daughter goes off to college and she calls back home and says, she admitted that she kind of ruined some of her daughter's or her suite mate's clothes because she put liquid Downy in the dryer. I'm like, oh my God, that story cannot get out. Of course, now I tell everyone. They're like, oh my God, did you hear Phil Duncan's daughter? This came back to me in another meeting. I'm like, oh, it's traveling, I guess. So the role of creative work to actually educate people about what your brand and or business is about. Clearly, there's the persuade. We want people to buy our brand versus competition, right? So there is the, why are you better? Why should I pay more? Why should I search you out in this kind of complex category that I'm trying to shop? So the persuade aspect is important. And finally, clearly, inspire. wow, that really moved me to tears. That's my goal today as I show you this series of work. If I don't, wow, you're a cold person. So anyway, but truly to inspire and have you share it with someone else. We've got some huge campaigns. Who's heard of Like a Girl on Always, right? One of the largest videos ever shared in the world that we kind of took a run at playing it on the freaking Super Bowl. We play a feminine protection ad on the Super Bowl. Why? Because it was relevant. We knew, going back to our who, women are just as large of watchers of the Super Bowl and actually engage more in the ads than they do on the game themselves. So we'll find you very much, thank you. And to watch them go, finally someone spoke to me in this sea of beer and cars and whatever, it just took off. So this notion of thinking about creative work across those 4 elements, on the brands that I'll now go into, so I'm gonna just show you a lot of work, right? Just to hopefully inspire you, and you can raise your hands and say, I thought that was terrible, I thought that was great, or what have you. But I want you to think about these 4 layers of the importance of work, because that's something that I think we look at and say, wow, we need to be thinking about when we ask for creative work, is it to remind people that I'm here? I'm scrolling through my Facebook posts, I see orange go by. Oh, is that Tide? Okay, subconsciously, we've done a lot of work in the cognitive science space. I know that's Tide. Why? It's iconic. It's used repeatedly, over and over, but it's also used creatively, okay? Educate, persuade, inspire. Any questions before I start to roll into work? Any challenges? I disagree? All right, good. Well, I mean, I'm done. All right. I love, Vicki, one of your setups, right? So here's a brand dating back to the history of P&G, right? And you think, okay, I've got to keep this brand relevant. And go. Okay, good. So let's just talk package work, right? So this was the digitized. I like the glitter on the Tide. That's kind of fun. That's cool. No, that's not there, but that's okay. Going back to the 40s and 50s, right? But here's a brand I think we've done a relatively good job, particularly from a core identity and packaging standpoint, of evolving the story. Whenever I see a brief that says we have to revolutionize the category, I get really nervous. That just is an invitation for the consumer to walk from your proposition. I'd rather see you evolve than re-evolve, if that makes sense. So I think we've done a good job, but now we're stretched into all these new platforms. So what I'm coming up with, as we call it, this kind of Tide world. What is the world of Tide? This is the beginning to paint our canvas for what the Tide brand should be and to look like, right? And we're clearly pulling on this iconic, graphic, bullseye. If there's one thing that's great about Tide is it has this super great orange color. Can't quite tell what got on the screen exactly the orange, but trust me, we know. And the bullseye, but then actually it kind of falls short of having anything else. So we had to really dive back into the brand and understand what were the assets that we wanted to continue to move forward with to create that sense of consistency. So here's before on a lot of our social posts, right? Not so consistent. Here's where we're trying to go, all right? And we call this a little bit of walk before we run. Okay, first question for the audience. I want someone to critique this work negatively. What do you see? Yes? It's hard to see, is that the first word you said? It's hard to see the package versus the background? I would agree, thank you. I did not pay you $20, right? We did not talk beforehand, right? So in this quest to own iconic orange, orange cannot become everything, because what happens? Nothing stands out, right? So simple rules for those in the contrast, color, composition still hold true even in mediums such as Facebook posts, Twitter posts, what have you, all right? So end tags for commercials, a mess. We got it to 1, right? A promotional activity, so that's kind of a mess. And here's where we're going based upon our new Tide world. And I start to think, wow, this is really starting to help us to, again, paint the canvas, have consumers understand. And I love, once you're able to do that, then you can step in and do some really nice things that, going back to inspire, educate, persuade, this starts to inspire me. Or one of my favorites, you can really get, like, who needs more explanation? I get it. In the summer, those things get on my clothes, and you're out. I don't have to have a whole lot of claims, a whole lot of demos. It just works. All right, so now how about this? Snapchat. We're stepping out onto Snapchat, right? And to think, well, I'm not sure who's watching this. Like, dads aren't watching this on, like, how many dads are Snapchatting, right? I do, but not very often, and you shouldn't see those anyway. But it's an interesting form of communication. And if Tide's going to be a big, popular brand that we want people to engage in, we've got to figure out how to step into those venues. I don't know if that's exactly right, but I love the fact that we stepped in and experimented. Why? Well, that didn't work. How much was the production value was close to an iPhone, right? It's 15 seconds, what have you. All right, so how about this piece of creative?
Don't tempt me.
How offensive.
Excuse me?
I won't let you blemish the sanctity of marriage.
No. Hang on. Listen, you know what totally inappropriate. You just...
There, flawless. Carry on, boys.
What did I miss by it?
All right, so guess what is one of the most interesting facts of that piece of creative work? We didn't do it. That was done by a director as his own kind of spec piece of work, and he posted it out on Facebook to generate work for himself, and suddenly the world starts to explode. Tide better get a hold of its brand. We love it. This is fantastic. Tide is stepping into the discussions around this whole very controversial topic, what have you. And it actually forced us to actually post and get involved in the discussion, which I was actually, as a brand builder and a person at P&G representing the company, we're really proud about us stepping out and saying, no, I think our post was something like #LoveMatters, and we want all people to be able to express the joy in their life. We didn't step squarely into the controversy, we didn't whatever, but this is a really interesting thing that's going to start to happen as the world obviously begins to express and take your creative work. I think it's one of the most ultimate signs of both brand affection when someone does something like that and then posts it out there for discussion and dialogue. So I love that. But here's Tide going from this iconic package in the 40s, this stepping into Snapchat and what have you, and painting its canvas across things that are inspiring, educating, what have you. All right? Sound good? All right, so we're going to step into a couple others. And I've got some experts in the room on the Pampers business, and they should probably be giving me this part of the presentation. But there was a lot of amazing kind of creative inspiration for Pampers. Again, going back to really understanding your who and what are the metaphors and stories, and using diapers as, yes, articles of fashion, getting them away from containers for poop and pee, right? And yeah, we can say things like poop and pee and kind of not laugh, but anyway, so you think about, well, how far can this metaphor go? What can this creative inspiration look like? Will moms really care about having an Argyle diaper? And actually what we learned was when you asked them, they would say, oh no, I don't want an Argyle. How ridiculous. You then showed it to them, and they squealed and fell over and were fighting each other for them, right? So this was a really interesting exercise around how you learn and cognitive science, right? If you ask someone, they will give you an answer that they think they're trying to please you. If you put it in front of them, if you prototype your idea and ask for a genuine response to the work, that's what greenlighted all this work from happening, or to happen. And it unlocked all sorts of things. How can we be more consistent in rail? I love Pampers. It's been a great story of evolution versus revolution, right? But at the same time, I love the header on this slide. Sorry. Okay, do we get it right? A small chuckle. Okay, good. Changing diapers. Good. All right. To really driving a sense of consistency across all things on the brand. So just a fabulous piece of work. And now I'm going to show you 3 pieces of creative in succession. And again, I want you to remember: educate, remind, inspire, and persuade. All right. So the first piece.
Overnight and more beautiful mornings. Pampers.
Okay, audience participation. What kind of advertising or creative work is that? Ooh, all 3. Good, yes. I'll take 3 or 4. I would say persuade, right? Compelling, in the morning, dry, side-by-side demo. Now watch this one.
Soon your grandma will learn to read and to keep the harm away. The doctor's gonna work hard night and day. And when in your line of sight, enemies will choose to end the fight. And though he's got no time to spare, the stranger's gonna help you climb each stair. And in case you're feeling down today, the businessman will be your clown. Drivers will slow down for you. Pets are gonna be extra careful too. Guards will try to make you laugh. Will pause on your behalf. And though it seems it's almost done, this lullaby for you has just begun. Hush, hush, now you know it's true. There is nothing we wouldn't do.
Yeah, I know. So I hope there's some, if there's not a little bit of tear in your eye, you're not human. All right. So before we can talk, I don't know why I do this to myself, because I'm always like, oh, I can't watch the film. All right. We'll lighten it up with this one and we'll talk about it. So here's the last one I wanted to show. Okay. So pretty cool stuff, huh? So again, it's a diaper brand, and yet it's entertaining, it's informative, it's persuading you, right? But the role of each of those pieces of creative work has a very specific job to be done on a Pampers brand, right? Clearly, the long piece of film that I showed is supposed to inspire. and have you think about Pampers in a much larger context. But that may not be enough, actually, for you to go out and purchase it, which is why the first piece, the mornings piece, right, is a critical part of it. I would argue that this is about showing an element of being human and fun. I try to encourage a lot of our brands to bring out a human side to themselves, their fun quality, their happy quality. A lot of our brands can be very serious problem solution, and we tend to get very serious about, our technology, which is great and fantastic. But at the end of the day, we're asking consumers to, choose our brand versus a competitor. And one of the ways the most compelling is to reach their heart as much as their head. So something like Pooh Face is great. All right, so I'm not going to run through. I'm running a little bit behind, but I've got a little bit on Gillette. So we were trying to sell this. The world looked like this. Wanted to look like that. We got into this interesting proposition called the Gillette Styler, which was very cool. I actually think the advertising that we had for it really pushed us to step into a new genre of being cool from a Gillette standpoint. I won't play it. Maybe you've seen this Adrian Brody spot. It's pretty hip. I'm running late, so I'm going to keep going. But then what it did is it opened up a broader canvas for us to talk about where guys were actually managing hair, right? So we stepped into body, going back to educate. So yes, believe it or not, you can see these on, right? So we're dealing with. Okay, so you got, right? So this is on Gillette.com, right? So suddenly this brand that was about must be clean shaven is doing this, and we're going to stop, all right, before I'm kicked out. But here's an interesting one that represents kind of the absolute edge of the canvas, right? All right, so it keeps going and gets even weirder. How many people have seen that in the room? Good. I didn't want many of you to have seen it, right? Because why? Are you the Who? No, not really the Who. But trust me, young men have watched this in the millions, right? So what is the role of your creative? What is it intended to do? And in this case, I would say it's persuade these young men that Gillette's even relevant. Right? And to say, we know what you're doing. We know you're managing hair in other places than just your face, and this product is best for you. Okay, but it's not done necessarily through, there's a lot of demos in there, right? There's a lot of, how it works, where it goes, what have you. And then the whole metaphor of square box head versus the other dude, right? All right, my last piece on this, and then I'll wrap up. I don't have any kind of lead-in slides. I'm just going to play this, and I would like a couple of comments from the audience of whether or not you feel. Think about, just visualize in your head, what does the Vicks brand stand for? Okay, to you. I'll play this, and you can tell me whether or not you think this is on the Vicks brand kind of creative canvas or not. comments? Any thoughts? Typically, past. I mean, typically this brand has been, depicting mothers rubbing, Vicks on a sick child's chest. I love this. I love the experimentation of it. I love it demonstrating that there are families that are composed of all sorts of different, walks and models and what have you. And there's a clear insight here, right, around touch and how it evodes not just a son and a father, but in any kind of familial context. All right, so I hope I've demonstrated a few things across this kind of litany of creative work that I brought in, this notion of, yes, you can match consistency with creativity. So we talk about being consistent and persistent and creative with the work. Always be writing the next chapter. Again, I think I alluded to that in one of the kind of the subjects, if you will. I don't like to see brands go for revolutionary change. I think good stewards of brands are always writing the very next chapter, keeping the storyline interesting, but not completely redoing all the characters, right? How frustrating it is to watch The Walking Dead and watch some of your favorite characters get killed off, right? Show your brand's human side. I mean, I really think for those of you who partner with us at P&G, we need to get better at recognizing that, yes, we are problem and solution and oriented, but the way to really drive a consumer habit change is to match that compelling kind of reason why with things that also speak to their heart. Define what are the boundaries of your canvas, but then don't be afraid to kind of look at these new platforms and kind of color off the side of the canvas. The beauty of a lot of these things is they're digital, and if it didn't work or people didn't like it or what have you, we'll take it down. Think about it in a very different construct. And then just embrace these. I know these can be daunting, and at P&G we talk about the need to do we have to master all of these platforms? Well, no. But we do have to have a really kind of good stewardship in terms of how our brand assets show up across these platforms, but they are fabulous opportunities for new and breakthrough types of creativity that still reinforce consistency from a brand standpoint. And that is my story. So thank you.